David Clark.
I look forward to making this contribution and am pleased to have received it so soon, although I also look forward to hearing what my colleagues around the House have to say and indeed to the possibility of the government defending this particularly indefensible piece of legislation, which, as Mr Robertson has alluded to, is a distasteful gimmick on behalf of the government, who have no real plan to effect any change other than one of perception, and even then they're skating on thin ice. We did look at this issue in depth in the Select Committee, and we asked questions about whether overseas payments would be likely to increase, what kinds of estimates the IRD might be able to make about the increase in payments as a result of putting an arrest clause in at the border. And it was very, very hard to get chunky, useful kind of information because, of course, the department's been put in a very difficult position by the Minister with this political posturing. And to their credit, they acknowledge that it's very difficult to try and draw any sensible conclusions from this piece of literature we have in front of us in the form of a bill. Part 1, where it talks about the nature of arrest at the border. And specifically, we're talking about 162A, the new clauses which describe how the arrest might happen and what kind of conviction might apply, including fines, who might issue such arrest warrants. A district court judge, we read in clause 162B, for a liable person, a district court judge, or if a district court judge is not available and the case appears to be urgent, a registrar may, on application in writing by the Commissioner, issue a warrant for the arrest of a person, the liable person, if the judge or registrar, as the case may be, is satisfied that the person has committed an offence in section 162A and is about to leave or attempt to leave New Zealand. That's where this is activated, and we debated vigorously in the Select Committee whether or not this was a useful addition to the legislation, and I think the argument was strongly in favour of it not being useful. It really makes no describable change other than giving the Commissioner a discretion to act presumably at the Minister's behest for political posturing, and that seems unprincipled and without real merit. On this side of the House, we are keen to support the notion that people be encouraged in practical ways to repay their debts. We very much support the collection of what is owed in terms of the borrowed money, because we believe in paying forward. We understand that those who have benefited from the scheme and themselves bettered their own lot, the lives of their families and communities, should be paying back what they owe so that other families and communities can benefit likewise. Unfortunately, this government doesn't particularly like the scheme, and they struggle to come to grips with it and constantly putting forward such things as this distasteful gimmick. We know that the national government put in the first place the loan scheme. Labor made it interest-free, which has benefited a generation of students, and then the National Party sought to introduce punitive fees on top of the interest-free segment, calling it an administration fee. You can see which direction, Mr Chair, the National Government wants to take this. They want to make it a more punitive scheme, make it less available to people of certain age groups, and here we have punishments designed to create headlines so that people will realise that they are being as stingy as they possibly can be about sharing the love when it comes to future education of our people. Mr Chair, we think that this bill, with its punitive measures, should be opposed, and so we are opposing it. We are very much distressed that the police also have indicated that they do not think they have the resources necessary to even implement the changes as proposed. It's a distasteful gimmick and therefore wasteful, because we're using parliamentary time to pass something that's merely posturing, that can never be implemented, we're told, or if it is implemented, will be implemented on a purely discretionary basis, Mr Chair.
David Clark.
On a purely discretionary basis, with few principles outlined or able to be outlined in the Select Committee process. We got told probably that it would be for more significant cases or cases where the Commissioner felt there was other factors involved and so on. It was very difficult to hear through the noise any real principle that lay behind it. Certainly not going to be effective. It just is political posturing. Meaningful change to improve student loan repayments from overseas borrowers, in our view, requires looking at options such as repayments based on earnings and negotiated payment agreements, including with third-party involvement, parents in particular, but unfortunately the government isn't considering these as part of the legislation. So what we have is a situation where some young New Zealanders are effectively exiled as enemies of the state because often they've got themselves into a position where they can't pay back their loan. If they've been overseas in order to better themselves, to get a view of the world that's broader, and they find that instead they have spent some time working in a pub, haven't earned the kind of money that might be owed, they're stuck overseas. They can't return. If there's a family funeral, tragic personal circumstances, they are now living in fear that they will be that one person that is picked off at the discretion of the Commissioner, at the beckoning of the Minister, in order to make an example, a distasteful example of their situation. So it's a kind of draconian measure and an impractical one and an unprincipled one. It's also worth noting that we don't have any real idea, as a Select Committee, we were left none the wiser as to how much money was likely to be retrieved. There's a lot of information we don't know about overseas borrowers. That's part of the real issue. And so there's information sharing provisions that are being looked at. I understand the Privacy Commissioner has had some issues with the sharing of data on compliant borrowers. That seems to be where the focus has gone. The Big Brother approach to things has predominated under this government. In fact, those who are not compliant, about whom we know very little, we are not capturing with this information. We only know that they are going to be more wary about returning to New Zealand to share their skills, to meet with their loved ones, and we also know, obviously, that there's 200,000 of them in Australia, over that number, since this government came to office. Not all students, admittedly, but they've left this country because this government hasn't given them hope. How this bill will give them more hope is very difficult to see. This is a government that's intent on clamping down politically on anything it sees as an easy target. It's not interested in constructive ways of supporting the betterment of New Zealanders, and New Zealanders are recognising more and more that this is a government out of touch, that has really not understood the benefits of an interest-free student loan scheme that will accrue to a generation, that will pay forward to a future generation, that will mean that we have a better tomorrow. Mr Chair, I hope that the Minister and the Chair does take a call to try and explain this populist policy and the benefits that might accrue from it, but I fear instead we'll have David Bennett on a rant about how the Labor Party's soft on borrowers and isn't constructive and so on and so forth. Well, look, Mr Chair, I'd hate to steal his thunder, but we do support constructive measures to get those loans back, and we support the scheme, unlike the National Party who do it through gritted teeth. We support it wholeheartedly because we see the benefit in education as an investment for future generations, for the betterment of this country. So I do look forward to Mr Bennett's contribution. I hope it's more constructive than occasionally he's tempted to deliver, and more than just a closure motion, because these are important issues that New Zealanders need to discuss and need to understand. We want to have a student loan system that works. We want people to pay forward. We want better education for our children, for the next generation, and we want a better society, and we are saddened to see that this government is intent on creating a few tragic examples in order to make a political gimmick stick.
David Bennett.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It's very disappointing to see